Hey there, deep divers. Ready to jump into some ancient history? I think this is one of the coolest empires that we've covered. So today we're looking at the Maurya Empire, but not in the way you might think. We're
Mhm.
not going to get bogged down in the battles and conquests. Instead, we're going to uncover how they built this economic powerhouse that really connected India to the whole world. It's a story that I feel like often gets overshadowed by the Roman narrative.
Yeah.
Everyone's heard of the Roman Empire, but this is happening at basically the same time. And I think what makes this deep dive even more interesting is that we can build on what we talked about in some of our previous episodes. Remember our deep dives on the Vedas and those
Oh,
Mahajanapadas?
yeah. Those were some good ones.
Yeah, I think those are going to provide some really good context for us today. So to kick things off, I think the big question we're exploring is this. You've heard of the Roman Empire, right?
Mhm.
But did you know that at the same time, India had this massive empire with this incredibly complex economy that rivals Rome in its reach and influence? I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, and it's this really fascinating parallel. While Rome's doing its thing over in Europe, you have the Mahajanapadas in India, particularly Magadha, with its strategic location and all that iron ore. They were really setting the stage for the Mauryas.
It's amazing to think about how these smaller nomadic groups basically transformed into these organized kingdoms. I mean, it's like they were laying the groundwork for this huge empire that was to
Exactly.
come. And it makes you realize that the need for systems of governance, taxation laws, all of that stuff, it all comes about naturally as things get more complex.
Yeah, definitely. And what I think is so interesting is how Vedic ideas like dharma and karma got woven into these early kingdoms. I mean, we're not talking just abstract concepts here. They really shaped everything. Social
Yeah.
structures, how kings justified their rule. It's pretty fascinating.
It's like this cultural DNA that gets passed down through generations and shapes the entire trajectory of a civilization.
Exactly. And it's with all of that as our backdrop that Chandragupta Maurya comes onto the scene. He was this brilliant military strategist who unified a huge chunk of the Indian subcontinent by 322 BCE. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people overlook. The Mauryas weren't just conquerors. They were these really smart economic architects. They were building an empire that could actually compete with Rome in terms of prosperity and reach.
So they weren't just about military power. They understood that to have real lasting power, you need a strong economic foundation.
Exactly. And they were really successful at it. Just think about it. They had this amazing agricultural system that was producing all this extra grain, lentils, fruits, vegetables. I mean, they had it all. And the surplus wasn't just about feeding everybody. It was about fueling trade both inside the empire and with the outside world.
Okay, so you got all this surplus. How do they get it to market? Are we talking like camel caravans and ox carts here?
Yeah. Well, those are definitely part of it. But the Mauryas went a step further. They knew how important infrastructure was. So they built and really meticulously maintained this enormous network of roads. And it ensured safe passage for merchants and all of their goods. I mean, these roads weren't just for getting around. They were like economic arteries that allowed the Mauryas to move everything quickly across their territory.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did these innovations have on the daily lives of the people living in the empire?
Well, just imagine bustling marketplaces overflowing with spices, silks, precious stones, and it's all flowing through this really well-organized network that's connecting every corner of the empire and even going beyond its borders.
Hmm.
Craftsmen in the cities were thriving. They were producing beautiful textiles, metalwork, luxury goods. I mean, the economic activity generated by this trade network created so many opportunities for people from all walks of life. Farmers could sell their surplus, merchants could expand their businesses, and skilled artisans could really showcase their talents.
It sounds like a really vibrant and interconnected economy driven by innovation and a pretty clear strategic vision.
And to make trade even smoother, they standardized weights and measures. And they even came up with a system of coinage which really simplified transactions and boosted economic growth. I mean, these weren't just conquerors, they were builders and innovators who understood that a strong economy was the bedrock of a powerful empire. All of this economic strength, it really allowed the Mauryas to flex their influence far beyond their borders. I mean, their trade network, it stretched all the way west to the Hellenistic world, places like Greece and Egypt, through land and sea routes.
So while Rome was busy conquering Europe, the Mauryas were already connecting with all of these other civilizations across huge distances. What kind of stuff was actually moving along these trade routes?
Oh, they were trading all kinds of valuable goods, silk spices, precious stones, all heading west. And in return, they were getting things like glassware and textiles. And there's even evidence that the Mauryas were trading with Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka.
It's crazy to picture these networks crisscrossing the ancient world, connecting these diverse cultures through commerce. But it wasn't just about the economics, right?
You're absolutely right. This global engagement, it had big cultural and diplomatic sides to it. And this was especially true during the reign of Emperor Ashoka. He came to power in 268 BCE.
Oh yeah, Ashoka, the emperor who converted to Buddhism.
Hmm.
Didn't he renounce violence after a particularly brutal battle?
He did.
Yeah.
After witnessing the horrors of war firsthand, Ashoka had this profound change. He completely dedicated himself to spreading Buddhism's message of peace and compassion, not just within his empire, but everywhere. He sent diplomatic missions to rulers in the Hellenistic world trying to foster cultural and political exchange.
So instead of just focusing on military expansion, he decided to use diplomacy and cultural exchange to expand the Mauryan influence.
Exactly. And we get these fascinating glimpses into these interactions from historical accounts. For example, Megasthenes, he was a Greek ambassador sent to the Maurya court by Seleucus Nicator, and he left behind this incredibly detailed account of Mauryan society.
Wait a minute. So we actually have a first-hand account from a Greek observer. What kind of things did he write about?
Well, he talked about these elaborate court rituals, sophisticated administrative systems, and impressive military structure. It's clear that he was really blown away by how massive and complex the Mauryan Empire was.
That's incredible. It's like getting to peek into a lost world. But like all empires, eventually the Mauryan Empire declined. Why did that happen?
You know, there's no one single reason. Internal conflicts, arguments over succession, pressure from outside forces, it all played a role. And eventually, around 185 BCE, the empire broke apart into smaller kingdoms.
It's like this recurring theme in history, isn't it? Empires rise, they flourish, and then they fall. But their impact often goes way beyond their political boundaries. What did the Mauryas leave behind? What was their legacy?
Yeah, it really makes you think about the impact of a civilization even after their political power kind of fades away. What traces of the Mauryan Empire can we still see in India today? Well, even though the empire itself broke apart, the Mauryas left an undeniable mark on India's cultural landscape. Their innovations in governance, their contributions to art, architecture, literature, philosophy, I mean, these influences are still felt today. But there's another layer to their story, one that connects them to this much wider global phenomenon. Have you ever heard of the Axial Age?
The Axial Age. It rings a bell, but I could definitely use a refresher.
Okay, well, think of it as this incredible period of intellectual and spiritual awakening that was happening all over the world from around 600 to 300 BCE. Societies everywhere were grappling with these really big questions about the meaning of life, the nature of reality, the relationship between the individual and society. It was a time of major philosophical and religious change.
So while the Mauryas were building their empire in India, similar shifts were happening in other parts of the world.
Exactly. In ancient Greece, you had thinkers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They were all challenging traditional ways of thinking, laying the foundations of Western philosophy.
Right, Socrates questioning everything Plato. With his theory of forms, Aristotle's emphasis on logic and reason, I mean, they were total intellectual revolutionaries.
And at the same time in Persia, you have Zoroaster introducing the concept of this cosmic struggle between good and evil, which had a huge impact on religious thought. And then in China, you have Confucius promoting ethical behavior and social harmony, and Lao Tzu advocating for living in harmony with nature.
Wow. It's like humanity was going through this collective growth spurt, questioning old assumptions and looking for deeper meaning.
And these weren't just abstract philosophical debates. These ideas actually had real-world consequences. They influenced how societies were structured, how people lived their lives, and even how rulers justified their power. The Mahajanapadas, with their focus on dharma and karma and the rise of new religions like Jainism and Buddhism, they were definitely part of this global conversation.
So the Mauryas weren't isolated. They were part of a world that was buzzing with new ideas and spiritual exploration.
Exactly. And this interconnectedness, it wasn't just about ideas, trade routes, travelers, diplomats. They were all spreading knowledge and cultural practices across vast distances. I mean, the world was a lot more interconnected than we often give it credit for.
It's really amazing to think about the Mauryas as part of this global network, influencing and being influenced by other civilizations. It really challenges that idea that the ancient world was disconnected.
It definitely does. It highlights how history isn't just this collection of separate stories. It's this incredibly complex and interconnected tapestry of human experience. And the Mauryan Empire, with its economic innovations, global connections, and its role in the Axial Age, it's this really vibrant thread in that tapestry.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today, from the rise of the Mahajanapadas to the economic innovations of the Mauryan Empire to their role in this global intellectual revolution. It's clear that the Mauryas were much more than just conquerors. They were builders, innovators, diplomats. They were definitely participants in a global exchange of ideas and culture.
It's a good reminder that even empires that eventually decline, they leave behind a legacy that can shape the world for centuries to come.
Absolutely. And for all of you deep divers out there, I hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives on this often overlooked chapter of history. The Mauryan Empire may be ancient history, but the questions they wrestled with about governance, trade, the meaning of life, these are questions that we're still grappling with today. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.